This is the Crappie Connection, brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Anderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet Purpose-Built Optics.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell here, Crappie Connection at the Mid-South Tackle and Boat Show in Grove, Oklahoma. Got my bud at the end.
Todd Huckabee, man. I've got some of our
Got some more of our buddies. Go ahead and kick it off, Jerry.
Jerry Hancock. Man, I'm glad to be here. I'm guide on Lake Fork, do a little bit of tournament fishing. Man, I appreciate y'all having me here. The show's awesome.
It's fun every time with Jerry.
I love it.
I'm Kayle Ward, guided in southern Oklahoma and North Texas. Same deal. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, guys, and to get to do one of these podcasts with y'all. Hopefully be able to share some information with some of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of the reason that we've got both of these gentlemen on here today is catching deep water crappie. And, that's not easy to do always. And I know Jerry's got a really strong background on it on Fork, and Kayle as well. And kind of go through some of the ways that you are able to catch deep water crappie.
Well, it's we talked about this earlier. It's changed now, with the livescope, forward-facing sonar, the way we usually fish. We're getting out on some deep creek channels and deep timber and catching a lot of suspended fish now. But, back in the day, it's funny here, we always talk pre-livescope, old school. You can still catch fish this way.
Absolutely.
Still people doing it. Not everybody has livescope. We all get caught up in livescope.
Yeah.
And honestly, I get tired of it. I get tired of only talking about it. I miss going out and fishing like we used to. And I started doing it. It's kind of a winter thing for me back in the day, guiding on Levon, started 20 years ago. The wintertime, them fish would leave structure and they'd disappear, and everybody kind of quit fishing for them. If you couldn't get up a creek, you couldn't find a fish. And we finally, figured out we would go down to the dam on deep points and ledges, and we'd spider rig some. But I preferred like Todd fishing, like two-poling. We dragging jigs.
Strolling, wasn't that the terminology?
Yeah, Kansas strolling, dragging jigs. I called it dragging jigs, But you just didn't go out there and start dragging jigs. There was a lot more to it. The only thing I had was 2D sonar. I didn't even have side imaging back then.
Right. And
I still prefer, if I'm looking for deep fish on the bottom, I'd prefer 2D sonar over anything, over down imaging and anything. That's the first thing we'd do is, get out and we'd try to find the fish on these points and ledges and use 2D sonar and spend a lot of time idling.
Yeah.
And looking for stuff and looking for fish and break lines and using our map, finding where these ledges were and all that stuff. And we found that without suspended fish were really tough to catch. But we would find those fish sitting on the bottom that were a lot easier to catch. So I would use the bottom. The bottom was the structure.
Jerry, when you're touching on this, and I think it's awesome, is what is the setup that you were using far as what was tied on your line?
Typically, back then, I was using mono, but I played with some different pound line. I used 2 8-ounce jigs.
Okay.
And I would typically tie them on, 18 inches apart. And back then I was using 10-pound mono, and I found that I used that setup. I could have went with 1/4 ounce. I could have went with lighter or heavier line, but over trial and error, I found out that 10-pound line with 2 1/8-ounce jigs, keeping contact with the bottom was key on these fish on the bottom. I want that bottom jig keeping contact. So I would drop my bait, whatever depth, 25-foot water, if I'm starting fishing, I'd drop it down the bottom, and I'd hold my rod about 2 foot off, and I'd reel the line tight, and then I would take off. Mm-hmm. And if I couldn't drop my tip down and that line go slack, I was moving too fast.
Right.
I found, and then you'd pay attention to your bites. Was your line further behind you, or was it straight up and down when they bit it? Were you moving? Were you sitting still? So those little key things like that was the real big factor that most people would overlook. They would just take off one speed, pick up a fish here and there. I'm paying attention to every single fish. Did he hit the bottom jig? If he hit the top jig, I would move up a little shallower, water, because I felt like those fish weren't as deep. And the little factors like that you would figure out that made the big difference.
Blood boiling right there is those factors when it comes into crappie fishing. No matter whatever technique it is those keys. And I know people have heard me say it for 3 years now, is finding that little piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. Going, like I said, you just don't go out there and start fishing. You would study and find your break lines and stuff. And the 2D sonar, what I would look, you want to see shad, but I hear this, if there's shad, there's fish. There's shad everywhere on a lot of these lakes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's shad in 5-foot water and there's shad in 50-foot water. So you can't just say, I see bait, let's start fishing. I didn't even worry about the bait. Most of the bait in the wintertime would be out deeper than the fish actually were. If you got out there and you see all your bait on these ledges and stuff 35 foot deep, you drop down below them, you're probably going to catch a catfish or a sand bass.
Right.
I'd always fish shallower than where the bait was. And those crappie, they're just sitting on that bottom,
they're
chilling.
Waiting them to come by.
They're waiting them to come in at night or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if I was catching sand bass or catfish, I felt like I was too deep. I would move shallower. And then once you find a depth, 25, 28, where you're getting most of your bites, just work that depth, And if the bite slows down, you could work out a little deeper. All while I was watching, that 2D sonar just like I'm watching livescope now. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I'm watching it. Now, everybody says, well, now all you do is stare at a graph. I've been staring at a graph for 20 years.
Right.
It was just a different graph.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you touched on that, because I think that a lot of people do get confused on when they're trying to find fish on bottom or deep fish. Still, with the electronics that I have, I find myself going back to just a straight 2D when I'm behind the steering wheel looking.
Yep.
Because I can see different color separation better than my old eyes can try to pick out fish in rocks or on bottom with side image.
Oh, much better. You've seen those pro bass fishermen drop shotting in that deep water for years. They got 2D sonar on there. Mm-hmm. Those guys have dialed it into where they could see their jig, their bait on 2D sonar.
Oh yeah.
They could see a fish coming up to it.
Absolutely.
2D sonar, it's been out forever. But to me, it's almost irreplaceable. They still haven't built a better mousetrap for a lot of things.
That's right.
And we have forgotten about it, side imaging and all that stuff, though we all use side imaging.
One thing on the 2D and down scan and we touched on the shad. One thing that I really concentrate whenever I'm scanning whatever function that I'm using at that point is how the bait balls are.
Oh yeah.
If I find an area that's just a lot of bait scattered out, the first thing that tells me is that's an inactive area. Mm-hmm. And I think people have the mindset, well, you just find the bait and the fish are going to be there and they're going to be eating, and that's not always the case.
Nope.
You can find a bunch of shad, and if they're just really scattered out, they're not scared.
You see them balls balled up, and there's
something's
feeding
eating
on
them.
And
you can learn that from watching National Geographic. I mean,
Yep.
The Animal Planet.
Oh, yeah.
It showed all that.
Jerry, back when you was talking about once you had contact with the bottom and you raise up a little bit, and if you couldn't drop your rod tip and hit bottom, you was going too fast and stuff. One of the things there on Eufaula now, this can be transferred into your deep water.
Yeah.
You can ask Barry Morrow. He's at this show. Ask him how deep that we always ran when we were strolling. And it would confuse people, but you can multiply this times 2 or times 3. But we would tell people that were down there that were not in our boat, that were asking us what we're doing. We said we're fishing 10 foot deep and 8 foot of water.
Yep.
Right.
If you're getting hung up, you're moving too slow.
Yep.
And if you're not catching fish, you're moving too fast.
Yep.
But 10 foot deep and 8 foot of water, so it could be 30 foot deep and 24 foot of water, and that way you know that speed.
Yep. Well, and there was days when you need to be moving a little faster. Some days I'd have to stretch out a little bit more line if I got out and say 30 foot, and because that's going to run behind you, so I could stay in contact. But I had found over trial and error that combination of 10-pound line, 2 1/8-ounce jigs, that controlled my speed. I didn't have GPS like we do now. I didn't know I was going 0.4 miles an hour. I had nothing to judge on other than my line angle. Mm-hmm. That was my GPS.
And the bite.
And the bite. On the bite sometimes, like I said, it could change from day to day. Sometimes you'd bump that trolling motor, and when them baits swung more straight back down, that's when you get a bite. Well, that'd tell me I need to slow down a little bit. We all know this, the difference in, Todd or you or me or Kayle or a lot of anglers from other really good anglers is that little key to detail. When did that fish bite? What was I doing? And you learn to pay that attention.
Jig up, or like you said, was that a turn on that outside pole?
Yeah, and that style of fishing at Fork, it's been famous for years down there. These guys come to SRA hump and they get out there and
they
go. The what?
The who's hump?
SRA. They call it the SRA hump.
That's like a community spot.
It's a community hump. Alligator, Little Caney Point, the dam. These people flock from all over the country. Most of them get out there now with a spot lock, or they anchor and they drop minnows and they just sit there. I've got a good friend, Randy Simmons, that guides on Fork, and Randy is he calls it cannonballing, and he's 2 jigs. He uses 1/4 ounce,
right.
A little different than what I do, but he is probably one of the best I've ever seen. And he just takes off and he works ridges, and he finds that ridge and with that depth where those fish are, and he just drags them baits down through there. Well, everybody's sitting still watching a minnow. Man, Randy's weaving in and out of them, staying on that brake line, and he smokes them.
Kinda
And
like
he
a
still
side
does.
pulling.
He's got live scope, but in the wintertime, he doesn't live scope. He does what he's been doing for 30 years, and he still outfishes most people on the lake with live scope. So, those styles of fishing still work, just like they always did. We just quit doing it. Mm-hmm. That's on us. That's not on the fish,
I'm still a puller. I'm not gonna lie.
So on Fork, when those fish get real deep on timber, what's deep? You catch them 40 foot?
Yes, sir. 40, 45. I've caught, we caught a 286. It was 48 foot deep and like 57 foot of water.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I would say typical wintertime fish are going to be 20 to 35 foot is the majority of fish. But I've noticed some of them big jumbo fish, they might be down there about 6 foot deeper, sitting by itself. And, and Kayle can tell you, he come down this winter and run some trips. He doesn't usually fish that deep. And one reason I wanted Kayle to come in here was Kayle's going to tell you that's not easy.
No, it's a challenge fishing that deep.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah.
Because here's one thing that I know a lot of people listening to this are going to ask, and myself included, is 2 years ago, I was fishing deep, and I had a buddy of mine with me, and I'm like, all right, there's a fish 35 foot deep, and I'm dropping, and I'm watching everything. And he was over here to my right just playing around, and he dropped his baits down, and he was on that fish.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand the whole
8-degree offset.
Yeah, the offset, and at that depth, how big where that cone is thrown and everything. So talk to us about zero offset and how you combat it.
Fishing that deep water, like I said, it's a challenge, and I do think that boat control, which is we always talk about it, is so crucial, because even with a 1/4 ounce jig with a 1/4 ounce weight above it, you're fishing 35 foot down. It takes some time to get that bait down to them fish, and to talk about like what you're talking about, the offset, us running our live scope transducers on our trolling motor, it has an offset to miss the head of our trolling motor. So when we're fishing shallow, we pretty much line up and drop straight in front of that trolling motor. But once you get down over 15, 20 foot, everything starts moving the direction. If your transducer's on the right-hand side of your shaft, everything starts going further. That beam does not run straight up and down. It actually runs at an angle. So with trial and error, that's what's, instead of lining your customer up and telling him to drop in front of that trolling motor, we're dropping sometimes 2 and 3 foot to the right, or mine's on the right-hand side of my trolling motor. So his rod is way over here and dropping. You won't even see your bait fall in the first couple foot, and then all of a sudden it comes into the picture. When you drop right in front, you're like, all right, it's going right on him. And then all of a sudden you're like, where's it at? And you get to moving your trolling motor, and you're like, well, how'd your bait get over there? It's almost like you have current or something, but it's not. It's the beam angle of that transducer. And so on the fishing with live scope like that, it's one thing I tell a lot of people. When we're fishing 8-10 foot of water, we drop it down. If you miss a little bit, you just move your rod tip a little bit. When your bait's down 35 foot, you have to move your rod tip 6 or 7 foot to get that bait to move any. And once you miss and you get off, it's easier to reel in and start over, because it's almost, you can't drive that bait to that fish or anything. It's got to be very, you have to rely on your customers to really listen and pay attention, because it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, mad respect to the guys like Jerry that does it all winter, because it'll make you want to pull your hair out at the end of the day. I promise you, fishing that deep. But it's on the opposite side of that, it's fun. I like customers, when you catch a 2-pound fish down that deep and he's fighting up the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
He's got to reel it for a ways.
They got to reel and fight, and on the long 13-foot trident, them fish are, them guys, oh man, he's so heavy, and you pull him up, and it might only be 11-inch black crappie, but they get some thrill out of that they don't when we're fishing shallow a lot of times, because it's, when we're fishing shallow,
just flipping them in the boat.
I tell everybody that's just high-tech cane pole fishing for when we're fishing shallow. So,
touching on what Kayle is, that whole angle deal. Now, and I'm thinking about trying it. They're making a bracket that will get that transducer off that head, so you can use a 0 degree, which would probably help on that extremely deep water. I do it because I've kind of learned the stair step. I know if I see that bait and the fish is 30, if I see it above 15 foot, he's not far enough left. Mine's on the left side. I say left 10,000 times a day. Left, 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 left. That's my customers. I tell them, you're going to get tired of hearing left, left, left. And like Kayle said, as soon as they drop it, I immediately start driving the boat or backing off when I see where the bait's falling. If they're off or something. It's hard to push a bait that deep. You got so much drag. I still fish. We had this top of the day. I use 1/8 ounce jigs with 3/16 weight above it, even 40 foot deep. Everybody's like, why don't you use a quarter? I don't know. I can't catch as many fish with a quarter, I don't think, and
because you're old and stubborn.
Yeah, because I'm old and stubborn. That's just what I do.
Right.
So I make it a little harder on me and my customers because I use a lighter weight jig. But it is. But there's something people don't realize. Like my boat set up, you've got it on that shaft and you're worried about that angle. What happens when you get a 260-pound guy sitting in the passenger seat of the boat and that boat goes like this? Well, that angle just changed on you.
Wow. I hadn't thought about that one.
I got 2 gas tanks in my boat. I always keep the passenger side full, and I run off, the driver's side full. I run off the passenger side because I know I've always got a passenger with me. So that way that boat will still sit level. And I get a guy, and if I got one fishing, one decides to get and go in the back, I'll have him go to the right side, and I'll have the passenger always sits in the passenger seat. Or I'll tell the passenger, hey, get up there in the driver's seat and watch the live scope on the dash. I want to keep that boat, because if that boat starts leaning, now that angle
it's
changed. You got to pay attention to those little things like that. I can tell just by the way the boat sits.
I've never thought about that one, Jerry.
Just the way the boat sits, I can tell, it's going to change. And then I have them, don't drop it as far left, or you got to go further left. So not that I'm not that good of a fisherman, actually. There's a lot of people can catch fish better than me, but I do really like to pay attention to some of those things that most people never even think about. And I do think over the period of a day, it helps me out over.
I got a suggestion for you, Jerry. You need a tattooed left on your hand. That way you can just say, left.
Yeah, I thought about getting one of them little buttons. It's just got a recording, left, left. About every 5 seconds it plays it, because that's what it is,
Right.
And, but, if I wanted to make it easier on myself, I would turn that thing off. I would get my 2D on. I'd go up to those ledges. I'd have everybody drop 2 bowls down, and we'd go drag jigs like we used to. We'd catch probably more fish. Now, the quality may not be what I can catch out on those deep creek channels. It would sure make my job easier.
Switch it up.
But when you can go out there and there's some monster fish on that creek channel and go hunt them, that's why a lot of people come to Lake Fork. They want to catch a big fish.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to target mostly. But it's totally 2 different styles, and it.
Both of them work.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I mean, what's deep to you, Todd, in the wintertime, Oklahoma? I mean, you're up in.
6, 7.
Yeah, see, it's,
Don't ask Todd that.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I start back up full-time Wednesday. We'll catch some fish, 11, maybe 12, but doubtful. Most of them will be 6 to 8.
Todd doesn't even have enough line on his reels. I promise you, come to Lake for it.
Oh, no. I mean, I do, but there's a bunch of knots where I've tied on new line on the old line.
Yeah. It's weird how you can go different parts of the country and the depth changes. We talk about pines. Well, you just won a tournament down there. It doesn't fish nearly as deep as Fork.
No, it don't. It still sets up the same. And to kind of touch on the subject, when we're talking about fishing deep, that's a vast subject, and so what we're focused on, especially, Texas, a lot of the timber lakes, we're focused on creek channels, ditches, drains, some kind of contour change, whether that be on the edge of a hump or like I said, the creek channel, the little ditches, and, like Lake of the Pines is one. There's deep water on that main creek channel, but there's actually ditches and areas across the lake that isn't quite as deep that is still holding fish, and there's some ditches no wider than this room, 10 yards wide that might only be 2 foot deeper than the little
Crappie
area.
highways there.
A little crappie.
They are.
Yep. But them fish down there, you can find fish that are down, might be in 18 to 24 foot of water, but they're suspended down 16, 18 foot, 20 foot. You can get out there on the channel and find some deeper fish, but it's not even close to Fork. I hear a lot of people like, man, how y'all fish Lake of the Pines and fish are deep? I'm like, yo, let's spend a week on Lake Fork. I mean,
So, Jerry, what do you think makes those fish at Fork live so deep? Is it the unbelievable amount of double-digit bass?
Well, I used to think that. I really did, but I can take you out there right now, and I can show you a boat arc tree that's got 15 crappie in it and a 12-pound bass sitting with them. Just sitting in there with them, Big old huge gar, all that stuff. So, though we know bass.
He's just hanging out with his food.
When he gets hungry, he's going to eat, but I don't know. I don't understand, because I would think if I was just thinking of the 2 lakes, I would say Pines would fish way deeper than Fork, but it doesn't for some reason. Fork, even in the summertime, Fork. Now, one side of Fork, which is weird, is clearer than the other side. The east arm's clear water than the west arm. You would think in the summertime those fish on that clear water deeper. That east arm fishes shallower in the summertime than it does on the west arm in the muddier water.
Personality.
It's got to have something to do with what Josh Johnson was talking about yesterday as far as dissolved oxygen.
Yeah, it has something to do with it. That east arm is cleared, doesn't have it, it's just typically, and I'm not going to bring up tournaments on Fork, but there's big fish on that east arm, but there's no secret where everybody likes to go on Fork. I mean, it's just like you follow, you're not going to the north end up there. You're going to fish the south end. Everybody knows that. Though there's fish up there, and it's the same thing. And I don't know why those fish so deep, because springtime they still go shallow. The summertime bite, catch them 15 to 20 foot deep. In the summertime, out in those trees.
So that's deep for me.
Yeah, that's the typical summer depth of those fish in those suspended trees. Most brush piles you're going to see people putting out are going to be 18, 20 foot of water for summertime. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. It could be the bass, but think of this: Texoma fishes extremely shallow. we say, well, it's because of the stripers. Seems like on Texoma they stay a lot shallower, and I always thought because of the stripers.
Well, striper do live a lot deeper than a largemouth.
Yeah, so
a largemouth is going to spend a big part of its life shallow.
So it works opposite on Texoma. So it could be the predators. It really could. It's just the personality of that lake. There's probably is an explanation. We may never know. But knowing that helps you when you go to a lake. Save you a lot of time. I used to tell people all the time, I'd do a fishing report out even before livescope, we'd go on these fishing forums, and I'd say, I caught fish 16 to 18 foot water on timber. Well, people say, where at? You didn't help me none. I said, I didn't help you. I just told you 16 to 18 foot water. 22,000 acre lake. Yeah. How much water is below 16 and how much is over? I just narrowed all that down for you.
That's a whole lot.
If you'll pay attention, we do it all the time. We read posts. We see what other people say. We're reading between the lines. You pay attention to detail.
Whenever I look at people's posts, I'm looking for the comments.
Yeah.
So if both of y'all are on fork and I'm looking at y'all's posts, y'all may be using different baits and this and that, but there's going to be a comment in there. It may be the depth of water you're targeting or how deep you're targeting them, or y'all both say we're fishing creek channel bends or we're fishing flats.
Yep.
There it is.
Yep. It's details, the finer details, all the time I talk about it, paying attention. Yeah. To me, that's really what separates these guys, everybody. Now, because we all got the same electronics. Yeah. We got maps. Think about it today compared to the way it was back in the day. We had paper maps and 2D sonar, no GPS, all that. Now everybody's got all the equipment to go do it, but some people miss that little bitty something.
Yeah, I agree.
So when you're out there and you find a fish and it's 40 foot deep, got to ask you, your poles and your drift paddles are down, aren't they?
Man, I'm gonna tell you what, if you're not running drift paddles, you're missing out.
And you're leaving them down the whole time.
I'll rate if I'm taking off scanning and running. Sometimes I'll bump them up, but whenever I go to start fishing, I drop them. It just settles that boat. It holds it. Especially if the wind's pushing to you, it'll also keep from pushing you back so much. Because like Kayle said, getting that bait 40 foot deep, it takes a while to get it down there, and that boat control is super critical. So anything you can find to help you hold that boat, because I don't spot lock. We don't spot lock, and so those paddles, and not just depending on the wind direction. I angle my paddles sometimes. Sometimes I want the rear of the boat to spin a little bit. So I'll turn those paddles to where they kind of like a rudder.
To the left.
Yep, to the left. Like we used to turn the steering wheel on our boater. Spider rigging. You had a crosswind. Turn to try to use it as a rudder. Same thing. Use those paddles the same way. Mm-hmm. So those paddles are. I know Kayle's got them too.
Yeah. To touch on that, a lot of people see the drift paddles and they think that that's for a lot of wind or for days a lot of wind. So them power poles are
better
way
on calm days.
Glass calm days when them power poles are the most efficient for us because that's our brakes. Can't emphasize that enough. Days where we're fighting a 20-mile-an-hour wind, that is your brake. So I don't use them near as much on a windy day as I do on a calm day. On a calm day, fishing that deep, I'm not going to say you have to have them, but it's definitely going to make you more efficient.
Right.
Isn't that weird how, a product that's really intended for one use turns out to be a great product for another use?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because they didn't design them for calm days, for sure.
No.
They designed them for windy days, and you guys are
anchoring in shallow water, you know? I would buy power poles, nothing else, just so I can pull my boat on the bank, drop them down, and not have to tie up. I don't even have a rope anymore on my boat, I don't think, I use them that. But the fishing, the paddle part of it, which is no secret in the tournament fishermen been using them. Some of these guys for a long, long time, and I watched them like, well, spider rigging and this and that, it might work. But after I got them, I tell you what, I would not have a boat that didn't have them on it, And now it's even going into the electric motors on the back. It's going to continue to People are going to always try to give themselves an advantage, and there are other things, and but it's Todd's right. He don't even have to know. He knows I've got my paddles down out there. I'm doing
guys, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show today. Hey, shoot us some more comments. Hey, we read them, we answer them. So if you got a question about deep water crappie, between the four of us, we'll get an answer for you.
Hey, in the comment section, tell us how deep's the deepest crappie you ever caught.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
That's not just a Texas thing either. The deepest crappie I've ever caught, and this may go back to the bass deal that you was talking about, Arbuckle Lake there in southern Oklahoma, right north of Ardmore. In the wintertime, the fish will get out and just roam in open water schools out in front of the dam, 70 foot of water down 45 and 50 foot. And I mean, when you pull them up, they're no longer with us. I mean, they're dead at that point. Yeah. But that's the deepest crappie I've ever caught, and that just like I heard about it, and the first time I went over there, just take off idling with 2D till you find schools of fish to spin it out in open water. Then that's when I used livescope. And first time I did that, that's even a whole nother deal besides Lake Fork, trying to drop a bait that deep and hold it on them with any winds it's a challenge.
Yep. All right, guys.
Till next time, I got myself here,
Todd Huckabee,
Jerry Hancock,
Kayle Ward,
Brad Chappell, holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel